This is the Awful Announcing Podcast. Here's your host, Brandon Contes.
All righty. Welcome to episode 84 of the Awful Announcing Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Contes, and this week we are joined by a former NFL MVP and current NFL analyst. You could catch him on the NFL Today before the Bills and Chiefs AFC Championship Game this Sunday on CBS and Paramount Plus. He is Matt Ryan. Matt, thanks so much for coming on the podcast today. How is this time of year for you as somebody who is still somewhat newly retired? Like, are you able to embrace being a fan and a media member, or does part of you still feel like you should be playing?
Yeah, I feel like it's a little of both, right? I think as a former player this time of the year, when you start kind of seeing the playoffs and remembering what it's like to be in those kind of situations, your juices get flowing a little bit. But I've enjoyed the broadcast side of it. Enjoy watching as a fan. I always have, and it's the best time of the year. I was at the college football national championship game last night, watching divisional games this weekend. It's a pretty good stretch of football right now.
You didn't officially retire until after your first year with CBS, correct?
Correct. Yes, that's correct.
Were you still fielding offers that season in the booth? Like, did you think, was there a chance that you could have made a comeback during the season?
I didn't know, at the beginning, to be honest, what that was going to look like. If there was going to be a situation late in the season or something like that might be of interest. But the more I got into calling the games last season and enjoying what I was doing in the space with, where my kids are at, where my family's at, where my life is at, probably about 4 or 5 weeks in, I was like, you know what, I really enjoy doing this and having fun doing it. It works for my family, works for me. So I know my agent, they're doing their job. When you're not retired, they're listening to, whatever might be out there or anything like that. But I was never serious on anything on the playing side, and really enjoyed what I was doing calling games last year.
When you left the Colts, did you expect to keep playing at that time, or like was it a surprise to you that you ended up at CBS as your next stop?
Yeah. I think so, because in your head, it's for so long, you just keep your head down and you keep working towards playing, right? And everything you do is geared towards getting your body ready, getting your mind ready, trying to prepare to kind of be ready for the next season. And you're in that space. At least I was, for 15 years in the NFL, but 5 years prior to that in college. It's 2 decades plus of just being in that same routine. And I knew at some point it was going to end, and there would be a transition and you'd be moving on to something else. But I do think it's always a bit of a surprise, right? Whenever life changes like as significantly as it did at that point, it is a bit of a surprise. And so felt like I was ready for it for the most part, to kind of move on. But I think there's always that element of kind of it hitting you and being like, oh man, I'm not playing anymore. And I've got to prepare and got to get ready to do different things.
Did you always know that you were interested in a second career in media? Was that a more recent revelation?
Yeah, I think more recent. I think you've got to be so committed, playing the quarterback position, and all that comes along with it. Not only the playing portion, but kind of being the face of the franchise and all of the responsibilities that come along with that. I think you're so invested in what you're doing, and you're so single-minded in your approach and your focus that there really isn't this space to kind of drift and think about what's next. But I was allowed that space after Indy, knowing I wasn't going to be back there and kind of having this time where I wasn't with anybody and taking a look into what I was doing. And initially when I signed up, it was going to be a mix of doing a little bit of studio work, maybe a handful of games here and there. And I thought that would be a great way to kind of dip my toe into that space and see, what I was interested in, if I liked it, if I enjoyed doing it. Circumstances changed and I got tossed in to the 3-man booth with Andrew Catalan and Tiki Barber last year, and had a blast doing that. And so it wasn't like this long-term plan. This is where I want to go. This is what I want to do. It was kind of just a next step, and it happened to be a step I really enjoyed.
How was the transition from the field to broadcasting? Like, did it help you in deciding that you were ready to retire? The fact that like you had this, that you were able to set your mind and focus on something new?
Yeah, I think it does help. I think it's hard, right? A massive part of you leaves when you're done playing. And people would say to me all the time, "It's great, if you're done, you can do whatever you want." And I was kind of like, "Well, I was doing what I wanted to do my entire life, right? All I ever wanted to do as a kid was that, and I had the opportunity to do it for a long time. So I do think going into that and having fun and enjoying the process and the build up and the work that goes into it, because it's a lot of work. If you want to do it well, I think it requires a lot of effort. But I enjoy that part of it, and so I do think that helped with the transition. I think it made it easier for me to kind of wrap my head around, moving in a new direction.
So you've done a season of both now. You did a season in the booth and a season in the studio. Do you have a preference?
I liked both. I mean, honestly, they're very. I mean, you probably know it, covering this all the time. They're very different, and how you have to approach your preparation and the skill set that you have to have. I think is very different. So I had a blast doing both. The energy at the stadium, I love that part of the games and calling it. I think that is great. The ability to have a great team and work together with the guys like I did in studio this past year, and to be able to kind of pre-prepare some graphics and use some of those things is a lot of fun. The macro approach to it, the 30,000 foot view on the league from the studio side, has been very different. It's the first time. It's the first time for me in like probably 16, 17 years where I've watched the entire league every week, and dive into the storylines that are going on. When you're playing, you never really get into that kind of stuff. You hear it, but you never dive too deep into it. You don't see, other than your opponents and stuff like that, or maybe a primetime game, you don't see a ton of football when you're playing. And the same is true, calling games. You're so locked in on one matchup and the defenses and the offenses and kind of the coaching staffs of the team that you're preparing for. You kind of miss some of all the entire landscape of the league, and that's been fun. Like I never watched NFL Red Zone before in my life, and I feel like my first week in the studio watching. I think we had maybe 10 games in the 1 o'clock window, watching all 10 going at one time. I was like, this is wild, it's fun. So yeah, it is. It's exciting. It's different. And I really enjoyed both.
Are there analysts that you've tried to emulate or take things from, or even are there analysts that you've leaned on a lot for advice?
Yeah, I think some of the best advice I've gotten is, you've got to do it your way. You've got to be yourself. And I think when you're authentic and you're not trying to be anything other than you are, I feel like that comes across best, on screen. There's certain guys, that I've watched along the way. I feel like growing up, I was in that John Madden era, right? And that was the pinnacle of announcing at that time. Um, but I'm nothing like John Madden, and that's not my personality type. I'm not going to try and be that. So I talked to Gary Danielson, a lot for a long time early on last year about calling games, and I thought, in talking to him, and kind of his wealth of experience and having done it for such a long time, I thought it was interesting to kind of hear some of the things that he thought about, that he talked about, and he was really helpful for me. But honestly, Andrew Catalon, working with him, and it's a completely different role, right? But Andrew Catalon, working with him my first year, I think was probably the most beneficial for me, given his experience, the number of guys that he's worked with, the range of sports that he covers, the personalities that he's run into. Just talking to him about prep and delivery and all of those different things, he was probably the most helpful for me.
Was it harder to learn how to do games in a three-person booth, or was it helpful to have a second analyst there in your first season?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know any different, so it's hard for me to compare the two. I think I would say early on it was helpful, right? Because you are figuring it out on a lot in a lot of ways on the fly, and how to work the talk back, when to use the talk back, nonverbal communication on the set, telestrator, all of those kind of things. It was nice to kind of have somebody in Tiki, who had done this before, and to kind of not even you don't even know what questions to ask. Like that's the thing beforehand. Until you've done it, you don't even know like what are the things you're going to be curious about, or what questions to ask people, because it's so free flowing and it moves so fast. So being able to kind of see it firsthand, I think from another analyst was really helpful in that 3-man booth. But it does become, I mean, there are challenges to it, right? Because the space in between, plays, you're talking about 15 seconds max of being able to communicate. And then I always found, so in the second half of last season, I was kind of doing the telestrator for us, and trying to telestrate for another analyst as they're talking might be the most difficult thing to do on the planet, right? Because you just don't know what direction they're going to go, even as well as somebody, and as much chemistry as you have. There's just so many different ways you can go with it, and trying to draw for somebody else talking is not the easiest thing to do. But I learned a ton. It was so much fun.
Drew Brees has said that he liked being in the booth better because preparing to call a game kind of replicates preparing to play in a game more than studio work does, and he guessed that's part of why Tom Brady might like calling games. So, like, did you like that aspect of it? Did you feel that aspect of it just the same?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's similar. You're so narrow focused when you're playing quarterback in the NFL, right? You're focused on one defense and how you're going to attack that defense. I think when you're calling a game, it's very much the same thing, right? You're looking at the matchups, one offense going against a defense, the other offense going against that defense, and then reversing it and thinking about how the defense might attack you. So I think from that point, from a prep standpoint, it's very similar. It's very, very focused on one thing. I always found the most difficult thing, at least calling games for me, was special teams. For I hadn't played special teams since I was in like fourth grade, and so that diving into like punt and diving into punt returns and kickoff, and the kickoff rules have changed this year. Even field goal or decision making that they're going through, I thought that required a lot of effort for me, because you don't know when one of those plays is going to hit and it's going to impact a game and change it. And you better know something about that. So that part I thought was interesting in doing it. But it's very different than when you get to the studio, right? It's nothing like preparing for playing a game like you did as a quarterback or calling a game, because you've got to dive into 16 different matchups that might be going on this week, and picking one or two key things that you can give your viewers, maybe something to watch for, or maybe a chance to educate in a certain way. So it's a really different approach and different strength, but I've enjoyed both. I mean, it's interesting to me. I didn't know how I would like kind of preparing for the studio and doing all those different things, but it kind of lets you be a fan a little bit more, and kind of enjoy the storylines and those things, and get caught up in the flow of the season from the fans' perspective.
So are you interested in returning to the booth at some point? Like, the studio is great, but it is those top game analysts are the ones that get those 9-figure contracts.
Yeah, I mean, I'm open to anything, really, and I feel like that's the beauty of where I'm at this point. I've loved doing the studio, I really have, and I love doing the games. And I feel like at CBS we've got a great group on the NFL Today. Working with Nate, working with Coach Cower, working with JB, working with JJ Watt. It's a great group to be around, and it's fun, and I've enjoyed that. And we'll see where kind of the future shakes out, but I'm enjoying myself right now.
How is the camaraderie and the chemistry grown in your first season on the NFL Today with James Brown, Nate Burleson, Bill Cowher, and sometimes JJ Watt?
Yeah, I think it's gotten better. I really do. I think, an understanding, even from the professional side of it, an understanding for people's timing, for their delivery, for when they're, for it just takes time to feel like when somebody's going to stop and you can chime in or do any of those things. But then also on top of that, I just think getting to know these guys better and seeing how they see the game, what their personalities are like, what are the things that energize them, what are the things they're passionate about. The group texts, kind of the group chats that we have in Monday night games or Thursday night games or even the Sunday night game after we're at, and just kind of the back and forth. I think all of those things have made our chemistry better, and it's been fun. And I think we all have kind of different views on the game and differing opinions, but there's a lot of mutual respect amongst everybody. So I've really enjoyed that, and I think it has gotten better. I think we've gotten better as a crew this season.
I want to talk a little bit about some of the playoff games, but I'm curious to get your thoughts on snow games because you're from Philadelphia. You played college football in Boston, but you played your entire home NFL career in a dome. So I think that gives you a unique perspective. But we just had Eagles Rams in the snow, and then obviously the CBS game, Bills Ravens in the snow. Do you like the fact that the weather can play a role in these playoff games?
Um, yeah, listen, I mean, as a quarterback, I feel like my favorite way to consume it is to watch it when it's played and it's not snowing sideways, right? You're seeing people being able to perform at the peak of their abilities when the conditions are right and showcase just how good they are. So I love that portion of it, but the kid in me and the fan in me still loves that viewing experience of going out and watching it in the snow. There is something to it when you're watching, right? And you see it coming down. There's something that hits different. And I like that from the fans' perspective. But I always was comfortable as a player playing in those kind of conditions. I feel like growing up in Philly and then playing college in Boston and having spring practice in March and early April in Boston is some of the most miserable weather you can experience. It's sometimes you're getting the snow, sometimes you're just getting that like 35 degrees and it's cold and raining and sleet. And so you learn how to play. And I always felt like I was good in those kind of conditions. But I think there's a bit of me that likes both. But the passer in me wants those good conditions and wants to watch those good conditions.
Yeah, I think that goes for probably goes for most fans as well. Like I there's certainly something exciting and like a different energy when they go to the game and it's snowing and like the beginning, the kickoff and there's a little bit of snow on the field and everything. But then the first time a receiver slips or you see a
Yeah.
quarterback miss a pass by 5 yards that he normally would have made, you're like, oh, maybe this isn't so great. But there's definitely there's something to just kind of like getting that snow visual. It definitely adds a little bit of energy and excitement to the game. I imagine did you grow up a Philadelphia Eagles fan?
I did. Yeah. I grew up, I was a, Eagles fan, Phillies fan, Sixers fan, Flyers fan, just like everybody else from that area.
Did you listen to Philly sports radio at all?
A little bit. I wasn't like a diehard, WIP guy or anything like that growing up, but they're big personalities and, they're legends in that city.
So are the narratives that come out now on like debate shows and sports radio today after especially after playoff games for quarterbacks, are they fair or unfair? And like I mean, Lamar Jackson might end up with 3 MVPs after this season, but today the conversation is about whether or not he can win in the playoffs. And like Josh Allen, if he loses to the Chiefs, it's going to be the same thing. So how do you view the media discourse around quarterbacks, especially in the playoffs?
I'm probably a little bit more balanced in my view of it. Is it fair? Yeah, it's fair. I mean this is the world we live in, right? And I think that the reason the sport is as big as it is because people love to listen to somebody go on and have their debate about whether he can win this game in the playoffs or is he this tier or that or whatever. So I think it is fair, and I think we all you understand that as a player. My perspective on those guys, though, is like if they keep giving themselves opportunities, they're both the caliber of players that are going to get there. I just believe that, and I think I've seen that from other players. I myself, going through it early in my career, losing playoff games and having that, same discourse and questions to answer and all of those things, and then finding a way to break through, right? And, make a run to the NFC Championship in 2012 and then to the Super Bowl in 16. I just think their time is going to come. Like, I think Lamar Jackson's time is coming. And I don't think it is a performance thing. I think you look at that last drive, right? When everything is on the line, his ability to make plays with the football, he's got what it takes. I think cleaning up some of those turnovers at the beginning, for sure, learning how to play in those type of games and maybe, pull the governor back a little bit, I think is important. But I think he's going to learn that. I think the same's true. Like Josh has got a great chance this week to change that narrative. And all it takes is 3 hours on a Sunday, and everything we've said about him before no longer exists. So I think I'm probably a little bit more level-headed on all of this, given my experience of going through it. Uh, but I do think it's fair.
How do you view your 2017 playoff run? Because from a stats perspective, you were nearly perfect. Like your numbers in those playoff games were ridiculously good, but everybody is going to remember the fumble. They're going to remember 28-3. Like, are you able to at least look back and be proud of how good you were during that run? Does that provide any sort of comfort?
Listen, I think nothing takes away the sting of not winning it, right? Like that is always there, and that's part of sports, right? Is there's a finality to every game that you play, and it's very black and white. And it was one of the things I always loved about playing is that you work all week and then there's a result and you've got to live with the result, with whatever it is. I think as you get further removed, I am proud of the way that I played, during that stretch. There's no question. I was playing the best football of my life, during that time, and delivering, in games and in the most critical of situations. So I'm very proud of that. Disappointed in how we lost, of course. And wish we could have done some things different, obviously, but we didn't. And that's how it goes. And you've got to keep, you got to keep moving forward. You got to keep living your life, and you can't go back and change the things that that happened and transpired. But I'm absolutely proud of how I played and how I performed, and wish it would have turned out different, but it didn't.
We had Logan Ryan on the podcast a couple weeks ago, and I asked him about the mood in the Patriots locker room down 21-3 at halftime. What was the mood in your locker room up 21-3 at that point?
I think it was much the same as it was for us all year. We had been a team that was explosive on offense and could go out there and score points. We were an opportunistic defense, and honestly, it was not too high or not too low. It was really, kind of this is what we do, and we're going to go out there and try and go with the same approach we have all season. So it wasn't like this thing is over or anything like that. Like there was no sense of that. It was very much the same as we were the entire season. And, it didn't shake out the way we needed it to in the second half and specifically the fourth quarter. But the mood and the mindset and all of those things, in my opinion, were right where they should be.
Are there any specific like regrets or a play or decision that you wish you could have done differently, have back from that game?
I mean, yeah, I think, listen, when it doesn't work out, obviously you'd like to have, something back or a play or two back. You talk about the fumble. We had Aldrick Robinson open, and coming open, and, I wish I could have gotten rid of it earlier, or, feeling that I wish I could have, put that ball on my chest and just taken the sack and done that. Or, after we complete the ball to Julio Jones on the sideline and he toe taps and, makes this play and we're basically in field goal range, to not take a sack in those situations, or to be able to get the football out of your hand, or to run the football. Like, of course, I wish we would have done some of those things differently, or I could have done some of those things differently to change that result. But that's it, man. That's sports, and that's why you watch, and that's why it's so great to watch, because contrary to what everybody might think, there is no script. There's no script to this thing. You don't know how it's going to shake out, and that's the beauty of it.
Do you think you deserve to be in the Hall of Fame?
Listen, I mean, I hope so, but my body of work is done, and I'm not a voter, and I've got no say in it. And obviously, it's one of the great honors any player can have, or any coach can have, or anybody affiliated with the league can have, is to be in there. And so I'm proud of what I've done. We'll see, how it shakes out, but my work is done, and we'll see how it shakes out.
Yeah. I don't have a say in it. I don't have a vote, obviously, either, but I definitely think the numbers speak for themselves, and you're a Hall of Fame quarterback, deserve to be there. Is there still a place in the NFL for the pocket passer who doesn't have much mobility?
I mean, I think you have to have mobility. I think that space, that the league, the position, it's evolved, it's changing. I mean, you look at the four guys who are left in the playoffs right now, and all of them have the ability to move outside of the pocket. Each of them use it kind of in different ways, and their approach to it is a little bit different. Patrick mainly to be able to move around and extend and throw down the field, but we've also seen some huge plays from him running the football. So I think you have to have that aspect of it. I look at a guy like Joe Burrow, who is definitely athletic enough, doesn't run often, but he's got perfect, pocket mobility and enough athleticism when he needs it. There's still space for that, right? Like, there's still big plays that are to be made from the pocket, but I think the days of guys being statues and not being able to move, I think we're moving past that.
How was playing for Dan Quinn, and how is it seeing him have so much success here in his first season with Washington?
Dan's awesome, and I loved playing for him. It was a great time in my career. He's just a really good person, and to see him having the level of success that they're having, it's not surprising, because I know the tone that he is setting every day he goes into that building, and the mindset that he comes into it. I think he's grown a lot as a coach, and he's evolved. I mean, you look at how aggressive he has been on fourth down, and this is kind of the evolution of the NFL and where we're going, and he's at the forefront of it. So I've been impressed by what they've done. I'm happy for him. I try and shoot him a note as much as I can to just tell him to keep it rolling and encourage him. The storyline of that whole franchise. You talk about the change in ownership, change in leadership in the coaching staff, the change that Jaden Daniels has brought to that place and to that fan base. It's as good of a story, if not the best story, in the NFL this season.
I know I got to let you go here in a minute. So what do you expect from the Bills and Chiefs this weekend? Like, just going through all the drama that we had this past weekend with Bills Ravens, now having Bills Chiefs in the championship game. I mean, CBS could not have drawn this one up any better.
Yeah, the AFC is a great spot to be right now, given the quarterback play, given the teams, given the storylines that we have on this. Listen, I think both these teams, are kind of mirror images of each other. And if you look at how Buffalo has played in the first two rounds of the playoffs, it's very reminiscent of what Kansas City did last year, running the football, playing good defense, not beating themselves. I think you're going to see a game like that, and it's going to be, to me, the first person that blinks, the first offense that turns the football over, because they've both been so good at taking care of the football. You look at the numbers from the quarterbacks during the playoffs, they haven't been gaudy. You think of this, you think of Josh Allen, you think of Patrick Mahomes, you think it's going to be these 300, plus yard games. And it just hasn't been that. That's not the way they've come into these football games. It's been a run first mentality on both sides. It's been protecting the football, not beating yourselves. And I think we're going to see that. It's either going to come down to who takes this away or which offense in the passing game can be the most explosive. I really think that's the difference, because I think both teams are going to run the football well, and it's going to come down to mistakes or big plays.
This week, this season, which team has the quarterback advantage in this game?
Yeah, I mean, that is the $1 million question. I think if you look at it, obviously Josh being in that MVP conversation, he's had the more prolific year from a stats standpoint, from a big play standpoint. But Patrick Mahomes, he's the ultimate winner. And this is, to me, I just don't know. I mean, to me, it feels like a push given the year that they've had, given the skill level of both these guys. It feels like you could flip a coin and not know who it's going to be. I know that's not the answer you're looking for, but it's my answer because it's what I truly believe. I think both these guys are on par. You'd give the experience to Patrick Mahomes. You'd give the current form and the form of this season to Josh Allen.
Matt, you were great. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Brandon. Appreciate you, man.
Of course. That is Matt Ryan. I'm Brandon Contes. This is the Awful Announcing Podcast. Please rate and subscribe to this podcast. Please also subscribe to Awful Announcing's YouTube page. But regardless of how you consume Awful Announcing and the Awful Announcing Podcast, thanks for listening and be good.
Thanks for listening to the Awful Announcing Podcast. For the latest news spanning the sports media landscape and more, check out awfulannouncing.com and follow us at Awful Announcing.